People think power is loud. They expect shouting, shattering glass, and heavy fists. But real power is entirely silent. It is a bespoke suit stepping quietly off an escalator. It is a platinum wedding band catching the fluorescent light of a department store. When a man kicks a woman to the marble floor for lingering near a luxury display, he expects tears. He expects a victim. What he doesn't know is that he just assaulted the wife of the city's most ruthless ghost. The Galleria did not smell like a mall. It smelled like cedarwood, ozone, and the kind of wealth that insulated you from the weather. Sadie hated it. She stood near the entrance of a high-end boutique, her fingers resting lightly against the glass display case. Inside sat a pair of rhodium cufflinks, simple, understated. She tilted her head, wondering if Roman would actually wear them, or if they would just end up in the velvet-lined graveyard of his dresser drawer. Probably the latter. Roman didn't care for accessories. He cared for control. She shifted her weight, the soles of her pristine white sneakers squeaking faintly against the polished marble floor. She was dressed in a pair of loose denim jeans and an oversized cashmere sweater. The sweater alone cost more than her rent used to be for an entire year. But it didn't scream money. Sadie preferred it that way. She had spent 26 years scraping pennies, sleeping in cars and wearing coats with busted zippers. You didn't just wash off poverty. It soaked into your bones. It dictated how you walked into a room, how you apologized to salespeople for simply browsing, how you braced yourself for the worst. I said, "Move." The voice clipped the air behind her, familiar and sharp. A cold spike of adrenaline hit the base of Sadie's neck. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. The brain remembers the pitch and cadence of the person who broke you. Trevor. Before she could process the impossibility of him being here, a hard, sharp force slammed into her right calf. It wasn't a bump. It wasn't an accidental nudge. It was a deliberate, violent kick from the pointed toe of a leather dress shoe. The impact buckled Sadie's leg. She pitched sideways, her shoulder colliding hard with the glass display case before she crumpled onto the marble floor. The dull thud of her knee hitting the ground echoed through the quiet boutique. A few shoppers turned their heads. The sales associate behind the counter gasped, taking a half step forward before freezing. Sadie stayed on the floor for a second, the cold stone biting through the denim of her jeans. A hot, stinging pain radiated from her calf. She blinked, the cedarwood scent of the store suddenly making her nauseous. "Jesus, are you deaf?" Trevor's voice floated above her, dripping with a manufactured exasperation. "People are trying to walk here. We don't need vagrants blocking the—" He stopped. Sadie pushed herself up onto one knee. She didn't scramble. She didn't cry out. She just slowly lifted her head, pushing a stray strand of dark hair out of her eyes. Trevor stood 2 feet away. He looked exactly the same, yet entirely different. He wore a sharp, tailored navy suit that fit him a little too tightly around the shoulders. His hair was slicked back, his watch oversized and gaudy. He looked like a man desperately trying to play a part. Hanging off his arm was a blonde woman in a silk dress, her lips parted in a mixture of shock and disgust. Trevor stared down at Sadie. The arrogance in his eyes flickered, replaced briefly by recognition, and then, almost instantly, twisted into something ugly and defensive. "Sadie," he said. He dragged her name through the dirt just by speaking it. She didn't answer. She pulled herself up to her feet, brushing a speck of dust from her jeans. Her knee throbbed. She looked at him. Really looked at him. This was the man she had worked double shifts for at the diner. The man whose student loans she had helped pay. The man who had packed his bags in the middle of the night 3 years ago, taking her last $600 from the jar in the kitchen, leaving a sticky note on the counter that said he needed to find his own path. "What are you doing here?" Trevor demanded, his voice rising a fraction of an inch. He let go of the blonde woman's arm and stepped closer to Sadie, invading her space. "Are you following me?" Sadie let out a short, dry breath that might have been a laugh if there was any humor in it. "Following you. Don't play stupid," Trevor snapped. He looked her up and down, his eyes catching the unbranded denim and the plain white sneakers. He couldn't read the fabric. He only saw what he wanted to see. The girl he had left behind in the dirt. "My firm's office is 2 blocks away. You think it's a coincidence you're loitering in the most expensive mall in the city on a Tuesday afternoon? Looking like that?" "Trevor, who is this?" the blonde woman asked, her voice high and reedy. She looked at Sadie like she was a stain on the marble. "Nobody, Chloe. Just an old mistake," Trevor said, not taking his eyes off Sadie. He puffed his chest out slightly. "Look, Sadie, I get it. You saw the engagement announcement in the paper. You saw I made partner. But this is pathetic. Stalking me while I'm shopping with my fiancé? Throwing yourself on the ground to make a scene?" Sadie stared at him. The sheer, unadulterated delusion of the man was almost fascinating. 3 years ago, his words would have gutted her. She would have cried. She would have begged him to understand. Now she just felt tired. "You kicked me, Trevor," she said, her voice perfectly level. "I nudged you to get out of the way. You tripped over your own clumsy feet," he shot back, a nasty smirk playing on his lips. "You always were looking for a handout. What's the scam here? You gonna sue me? You gonna cry to security that the big bad lawyer pushed you? Nobody here is going to believe you. Look at you. You don't even belong in this building." Sadie didn't raise her voice. She didn't clench her fists. She just looked past his shoulder toward the front entrance of the boutique. 2 large men in dark charcoal suits had stopped walking. They were stationed exactly 30 feet away. They weren't looking at Trevor. They were looking at Sadie. One of them, a man with a broken nose named Arthur, caught her eye. He tilted his head a fraction of an inch. A silent question. "Do we intervene?" Sadie gave a microscopic shake of her head. No, she wanted to see this play out. She wanted to see exactly how deep Trevor would dig his own grave before he realized he was standing in it. "Nothing to say." Trevor stepped closer, his cologne washing over her. It smelled sharp, aggressive, cheap despite whatever price tag was attached to it. Still the same quiet, pathetic little mouse. "Trevor, let's just go," Chloe said, tugging at his sleeve. "She's creeping me out. The manager is looking." "Let him look," Trevor said loudly. He was performing now. He was a man who felt small on the inside, using Sadie as a step stool to make himself look tall for his new bride. It's a public service. These stores need to know they can't just let anyone wander in off the street. It ruins the aesthetic. He turned back to Sadie, lowering his voice into a cruel, patronizing whisper. "I told you when I left, Sadie. You were an anchor. You dragged me down. You had no ambition, no drive. You were perfectly happy living in squalor. And look at you now, still exactly where I left you, wearing baggy clothes, looking at things you could never in a million lifetimes afford. It's sad." Sadie looked at the glass display case, the rhodium cufflinks. "I'm actually here to buy a gift," Sadie said quietly. Trevor laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "A gift? With what? Food stamps? Spare change you begged off the street corner?" He reached out and forcefully tapped the glass case with his knuckles. "Do you even know what this stuff costs? A pair of these cufflinks is a month's rent for a normal person. For you, it's a year's wages." "Don't touch the glass," Sadie said. Trevor blinked, thrown off by the calm authority in her tone. Then his face darkened. His jaw tightened, the muscles ticking beneath the skin. He hated being told what to do, especially by her. "Who the hell do you think you are talking to?" Trevor sneered. He closed the distance between them, crowding her against the counter. He raised a finger, pointing it directly into her face. "You listen to me, you piece of trash. You turn around, you walk out of these doors, and you go back to whatever rat-infested hole you crawled out of. If I ever see you near me, my firm, or my fiancé again, I will have you arrested for harassment. Do you understand me? I will ruin whatever pathetic excuse for a life you have left." Sadie looked at the finger pointing in her face. She remembered a time when Trevor had yelled at her for buying the wrong brand of coffee. He had thrown the bag against the wall, splitting it open, dark grounds spilling all over their cheap linoleum floor. She had spent an hour sweeping it up, apologizing through tears. She remembered feeling so incredibly small. She felt nothing now, just a hollow, clinical observation of a dying animal. "You're making a mistake, Trevor," Sadie said softly. "The only mistake I ever made was staying with you as long as I did." He spat. He moved to shove her shoulder. Just a final, physical punctuation to his dominance. His hand never made contact. A shadow fell over the brightly lit jewelry counter. It was as if the temperature in the boutique plummeted 10 degrees in a single second. The ambient noise of the mall, the soft jazz music, the murmur of shoppers, the clicking of heels, seemed to just vanish, sucked into a vacuum. A large, calloused hand clamped down on Trevor's wrist. The grip was not a warning, it was a vice. The crunch of compressing bone was audible, followed instantly by Trevor's sharp, strangled gasp. "Do not touch her." The voice was low. It didn't boom, it didn't echo, it barely rose above a whisper, yet it possessed a dense, suffocating weight. It was the sound of a heavy steel door locking shut. Sadie looked up. Roman. He stood 6'3", wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that moved with liquid grace over his broad frame. His dark hair was meticulously styled, his jaw sharp and dusted with a 5 o'clock shadow. But it was his eyes that stopped people dead. They were a pale, icy blue, entirely devoid of warmth. They were the eyes of a man who looked at a human being and saw only mechanics, levers and breaking points. He did not look at Trevor. He looked at Sadie. "Are you hurt?" Roman asked her. The question was gentle, but the undercurrent was lethal. "I'm fine," Sadie said. "He kicked you." Roman stated it as a fact. He had seen it. He had been walking up the concourse when it happened. "Roman, it's fine," Sadie said, placing her hand lightly on the sleeve of his suit. "He's not worth it." Trevor was struggling. His face was pale, beads of sweat breaking out on his forehead as he tried to pry his wrist free from Roman's grip. But Roman's hand might as well have been cast in iron. "Hey, let go of me!" Trevor stammered, his confident lawyer persona evaporating instantly in the face of raw, physical superiority. "Who the hell are you? Assault! This is assault! Chloe, get security!" Chloe was frozen, clutching her expensive handbag to her chest, her eyes wide with terror. She didn't move. She couldn't. 2 men in dark suits, Arthur and another man named Silas, had materialized behind her. They didn't touch her. They just stood there, massive and impassive, cutting off any route of escape. Roman finally turned his head to look at Trevor. He examined the smaller man for a long, agonizing moment. Roman didn't frown. He didn't sneer. He just observed Trevor with a detached curiosity, like a scientist looking at a particularly ugly insect. "You speak a great deal for a man who is about to lose his tongue," Roman said quietly. Trevor swallowed hard, his bravado failing him. The pain in his wrist was excruciating, radiating up his arm to his shoulder. I'm a partner at Davis and Sterling. I know the police commissioner. You let go of me right now, or I'll have you thrown in jail so fast. Roman applied an ounce more pressure to the wrist. Trevor's knees buckled. A high-pitched, pathetic whine escaped his throat. He dropped to his knees on the marble floor, right exactly where Sadie had fallen moments before. You are kneeling, Roman noted softly, still holding the man's wrist, forcing his arm up at an unnatural angle. This is appropriate. The boutique manager, a man in a tight waistcoat, finally found his courage and rushed forward. Excuse me, sir. Sir, you can't do this in here. I'm calling mall security. Arthur stepped smoothly in front of the manager. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't draw a weapon. He just reached into his jacket, pulled out a thick, unmarked black card, and placed it on the glass counter. The manager looked at the card. He looked at Arthur. Then the blood drained from his face, leaving him a chalky white. He took 2 steps backward, turned around, and walked briskly to the back room, closing the door behind him. Trevor saw this. Through the haze of pain, the reality of the situation began to pierce through his arrogance. Security wasn't coming. The police weren't coming. The rules of his world did not apply here. Sadie, Trevor gasped, looking up at her from the floor. His eyes were wide, panicked. Sadie, tell him to let me go. Sadie looked down at him. She felt a profound sense of nothingness. Why? Sadie asked simply. You told me you didn't know me. You said I was a vagrant. I was joking. We dated. We lived together. Trevor pleaded. He looked at Roman. We were together. Tell him. Roman's icy blue eyes flickered. A dangerous, subtle shift. You lived with my wife? Roman asked. The words dropped like stones into a calm pond. Trevor froze. The air left his lungs in a rush. He stared at Sadie, then back to Roman, his brain struggling to compute the information. Wife. Wife! Trevor choked out. She has nothing. She's nobody. She works at a diner. She is my wife, Roman said, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating with a dark, territorial hum. She is the air I breathe. She is the ground I walk on. And you put your foot on her. Roman released Trevor's wrist. Trevor fell back on his hands, scrambling away slightly, cradling his throbbing arm against his chest. He looked up at Roman, breathing heavily. Who are you? I am the man who owns the building your law firm leases, Roman said evenly. He adjusted the cuff of his suit, looking perfectly relaxed. I am the man who funds the police commissioner's re-election campaigns. I am the man who holds the debt of your new father-in-law's failing tech company. Trevor's face went slack. The pieces clicked together. The stories he had heard in hushed whispers at partner meetings, the shadow money that ran the city's real estate, the syndicate that didn't use guns anymore because they used bank accounts. Roman, Trevor whispered, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. Yes. Roman looked down at him. And you are Trevor, the coward who stole $600 from a starving girl. Trevor flinched. How did he know that? Roman knew everything. He had run a background check on Sadie the day he met her. He had read the files. He had seen the financial records. He had known about Trevor for 2 years, but Sadie had asked him to leave it alone. She had said Trevor wasn't worth the energy of revenge. Roman had respected her wishes. Until today. It was a mistake, Trevor stammered, tears welling in his eyes. The arrogance was gone, stripped away entirely, leaving only a terrified boy in a cheap suit. I was young. I didn't mean it. You kicked her, Roman repeated, the fact immovable in his mind. I tripped. It was an accident, I swear to God. Trevor looked at Chloe. Chloe, tell him. Chloe took a step backward, shaking her head. She looked at Trevor not with love, but with sudden, intense revulsion. She was realizing exactly what kind of man she had tied herself to. "You told her she did not belong here," Roman continued, ignoring the fiancé. He looked around the high-end boutique. He looked at the terrified staff hiding in the back. He looked at Arthur. "By the store," Roman said. Arthur nodded once, pulling a phone from his pocket. Trevor stared, uncomprehending. "What?" Roman looked back down at Trevor. "I'm buying the store, this specific boutique, and once the paperwork clears in approximately 20 minutes, you will be trespassing on private property." Roman took a single step closer to Trevor. Trevor scrambled backward on the floor until his back hit a display pillar. "You have 20 minutes, Trevor," Roman said, his voice a soft, deadly purr. "In 20 minutes, I will have your law firm evicted. I will call in the debt on your father-in-law's company, forcing a liquidation by Friday. And if I ever see your face in my city again, I will not hold your wrist. I will remove your hands." Trevor couldn't speak. He was hyperventilating, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with a primal terror. He looked at Sadie, a silent, desperate plea for mercy. Sadie looked back at him. She thought about the nights she had cried herself to sleep on an empty stomach. She thought about the cold, the fear, the absolute certainty that she was worthless. She reached out and took Roman's hand. His grip was warm, solid, completely secure. "Let's go home, Roman," Sadie said. "It smells like garbage in here." Roman's eyes softened, just a fraction, as he looked at her. He brought her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "As you wish, my love." They turned and walked out of the boutique. The two massive guards followed silently behind them, leaving Trevor kneeling on the marble floor, completely alone, listening to the sound of his entire life crumbling to dust. The transition from the brightly lit, sterile concourse of the Galleria to the heavy, armored interior of Roman's Maybach felt like crossing into a different dimension. The heavy door closed with a solid, muffled thud, instantly cutting off the ambient noise of the city. Inside, it smelled of rich leather and the faint, crisp scent of peppermint. The windows were heavily tinted, turning the bright afternoon sun into a muted, muddy twilight. Sadie sat near the window, her hands folded in her lap. For the first 3 minutes of the drive, neither of them spoke. The engine was a silent beast. A vibration felt more in the teeth than heard in the ears. Arthur sat in the front passenger seat, a monolithic silhouette against the dashboard, while the driver navigated the afternoon traffic with terrifying efficiency. Sadie stared at her hands. Her knuckles were white. The fingers of her left hand were trembling slightly. It wasn't fear. Not anymore. It was the biological tax of an adrenaline dump. Her body was finally realizing the threat was over, and it was violently purging the survival chemicals it had flooded her system with. She hated the shaking. It made her feel fragile. It reminded her of the nights she used to spend, sitting on a closed toilet lid in a freezing apartment, waiting for Trevor to finish breaking dishes in the kitchen. A large, warm hand covered hers. Roman didn't say a word. He didn't ask if she was okay. He knew she wasn't. He simply unclasped her tightly knit fingers and intertwined them with his own. His thumb, rough along the edge from years of physical conditioning, began to trace slow, deliberate circles over the back of her hand. The physical grounding worked. The shaking in her left hand subsided, absorbed by his steady pulse. "I didn't want you to see that," Sadie said quietly, breaking the silence. She kept her eyes fixed on the tinted window. "See what?" Roman asked. His voice was a low, resonant rumble in the quiet cabin. "Me. Like that." She swallowed, the knot in her throat feeling thick and barbed. "Small." Roman shifted on the leather seat. The movement was fluid, adjusting his large frame so he was angled entirely toward her. He reached out with his free hand, gently catching her chin and turning her face away from the glass. His blue eyes were no longer the glacial empty voids they had been in the boutique. When he looked at her, the ice thawed, revealing something deeply focused and intensely human. "You were not small, Sadie," he said, his tone absolute. "You were standing in a room with a man who stole years from your life, a man who tried to physically intimidate you, and you did not flinch. You looked at him like he was a stain on the pavement. I have men who work for me, hardened, violent men, who cannot maintain that level of composure. I was frozen," she argued weakly. "You were calculating," Roman corrected. He let go of her chin, his hand moving down to rest on her thigh, just above her knee. "May I?" Sadie nodded. Roman gently rolled up the hem of her loose denim jeans. He moved with a clinical carefulness, as if handling a priceless, cracked artifact. When the denim cleared her calf, the harsh reality of the encounter was laid bare. A dark, angry patch of purple and red was already blooming across her pale skin, sitting just below the curve of her calf muscle. The center was slightly swollen, a clear imprint of the pointed toe of Trevor's dress shoe. The air in the car shifted. The temperature seemed to drop. Sadie watched Roman's jaw tighten, the muscle feathered just beneath his ear. He stared at the bruise, and for a split second, the man who owned the city's shadows resurfaced. It was a terrifying stillness. He wasn't looking at a bruise, he was looking at an unpaid debt. "Roman," Sadie said softly. She squeezed his hand. He blinked, the violent static in his eyes receding as he looked back up at her face. "I will have a doctor waiting at the building," Roman said, his voice flat. "It's just a bruise. It doesn't even need ice, just a little time." "He put his hands on you. He put his foot on you." Roman's voice dropped, vibrating with a dark, primal possessiveness that usually terrified people. For Sadie, it was the only thing that had ever made her feel safe. "He marked you. That requires a response." "You already responded," Sadie reminded him. "You took everything he has." "I took his money and his status," Roman said dismissively, carefully rolling her pant leg back down. "Those are temporary inconveniences. They can be rebuilt." "Not the way you destroy them," she said. A ghost of a smile touched the corner of Roman's mouth. It was a grim, beautiful thing. "True." He leaned back against the leather seat, pulling her gently by the hand until the gap between them closed. Sadie rested her head against his shoulder. He smelled like bergamot, dark espresso, and expensive wool. "Arthur," Roman said, not raising his voice. In the front seat, the bodyguard immediately tilted his head. "Sir." "The firm where the lawyer works, Garrison and Webb." "Yes, sir. We own the commercial tower they occupy on Fifth Avenue. The lease is held by one of our subsidiary holding companies." "Terminate it." Roman rested his chin lightly on the top of Sadie's head. "Effective immediately. Cite the morality clause in Section 4. I want them out of the building by midnight." "Understood, sir." "And Arthur?" "Yes, sir." "Ensure the freight elevators are disabled at 6 p.m. They can carry their filing cabinets down the stairs." Sadie closed her eyes, a tired sigh escaping her lips. She didn't feel a rush of victorious joy. Real life wasn't a movie. You didn't dance on the graves of the people who hurt you. You mostly just felt relieved they were dead and buried. "Are you sure this is necessary?" she asked, her voice muffled against his suit jacket. "His bosses didn't do anything. They hired him," Roman said simply. "A man's judgment is reflected in the company he keeps. They kept a rat. Now they lose the ship." He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. The car glided smoothly around a corner, carrying them away from the noise, away from the past, and toward the sky. Trevor stumbled out of the elevator on the 42nd floor, his breath coming in ragged, uneven gasps. His right wrist throbbed with a sickening, rhythmic pulse. He had wrapped a cold, wet paper towel around it in the mall bathroom, but the joint was already swelling to the size of a tennis ball. Every time his heart beat, a fresh wave of nausea washed over him. He had tried calling Chloe 5 times on the cab ride over. 5 times it had gone straight to voicemail. On the 6th attempt, he received an automated text message from her carrier, stating the number was no longer in service. She hadn't just blocked him. She had physically changed her phone number in the span of 20 minutes. The glass doors to Garrison and Webb stood open. Usually the reception area was a pristine, silent temple of mahogany and marble, guarded by a receptionist who looked like she stepped off a runway. Today, the reception desk was abandoned. The phone lines were blinking wildly, unanswered. Trevor pushed through the glass doors, clutching his injured arm against his stomach. The bullpen, usually a hive of quiet typing and hushed negotiations, was in absolute chaos. Paralegals were frantically shoving files into cardboard banking boxes. Associates were pulling framed diplomas off the walls, the sound of breaking glass echoing from a corner office where someone had dropped a picture frame. "Hey!" Trevor croaked, grabbing the sleeve of a junior associate running past him with a stack of legal pads. "Hey, what the hell is going on? Is there a fire?" The associate looked at Trevor, his eyes wide with a mixture of panic and deep-seated fury. "Are you out of your mind? Let go of me!" He yanked his arm away, dropping half the legal pads. "Garrison is looking for you. He's in his office. You better get in there, man. You screwed us. You screwed all of us." Trevor's stomach bottomed out. The cold, sterile reality of Roman's promise came rushing back. "In 20 minutes, I will have your law firm evicted." He hadn't been bluffing. Trevor walked down the hallway on legs that felt like wet cement. He passed his own office. The door was open. 2 large men in grey utility uniforms were currently tossing his books, his files, and his expensive crystal whiskey decanter into heavy-duty trash bags. "Hey, that's my stuff!" Trevor yelled, his voice cracking. One of the men paused, looked at Trevor, and tossed the decanter into the bag. It shattered against a hole puncher with a dull crunch. "Building management says everything not boxed by midnight goes to the incinerator. You want to box it one-handed? Be my guest." Trevor backed away, the blood rushing in his ears. He turned toward the managing partner's office at the end of the hall. The door was already open. Arthur Garrison, a man who usually commanded a room just by clearing his throat, was sitting behind his massive oak desk. He wasn't packing. He was staring at a piece of heavy cream-colored cardstock resting on his blotter. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "Arthur," Trevor said, stepping into the doorway. "Arthur, what is happening? The movers." Garrison slowly raised his head. He didn't look angry. He looked entirely hollowed out. "Close the door, Trevor." Trevor pushed the heavy wooden door shut. It clicked into place, sealing them in the quiet office. "I got a call 20 minutes ago from the holding company that owns this building," Garrison said, his voice a dry, papery rasp. "They triggered a morality clause in our lease, a clause I fought to remove 5 years ago, but they insisted on keeping. It gives them the right to unilaterally terminate the agreement without notice if an employee of the firm engages in conduct detrimental to the building owner." "That's illegal," Trevor said instinctively, his lawyer brain grasping for a lifeline. "They can't do that. We have tenant rights. We can file an injunction." "An injunction against whom, Trevor?" Garrison asked gently. It was the gentleness of a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. "The holding company is a shell. It's owned by a trust in the Caymans, which is managed by a proxy firm in Geneva. By the time we unpeel the layers to find someone to serve with a subpoena, we'll be bankrupt from the legal fees. They hold all our physical assets hostage as of midnight. Garrison stood up, leaning his knuckles on the desk. 10 minutes after that call, our 3 largest clients that make up 40% of our billable hours, called to terminate our retention agreements. No explanation. Just effective immediately. Trevor felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. Arthur, we can fix this. I'll make calls. Then, Garrison continued, ignoring him entirely, I received a personal phone call from a man who didn't give his name. He just told me that one of my junior partners kicked his wife in a jewelry store. Silence descended on the room. It was absolute, suffocating. Trevor tried to swallow, but his mouth was completely dry. Arthur, it was a misunderstanding. She tripped. I didn't. Shut up. Garrison didn't raise his voice, but the command struck like a whip. Do not insult my intelligence by lying to me. The man on the phone told me that if you are still on our payroll by the time I hang up, he will personally ensure that not a single partner in this firm ever practices law in this state again. Garrison reached out and picked up a single sheet of paper from his desk. He held it out. This is your termination letter, Trevor. Effective retroactively as of an hour ago. Your severance is 0. Your equity is forfeit to cover the damages you have caused this firm today. Security has already deactivated your building pass. You can't do this, Trevor shouted, the panic finally breaking through his paralysis. I brought in the Chloe account. My father-in-law's tech company is going to make this firm millions. Garrison let out a tired, barking laugh. Your father-in-law? You haven't checked the news, have you? Garrison reached over and turned his computer monitor so Trevor could see the screen. It was a live feed from a financial news network. The ticker at the bottom was flashing red. Breaking. Major tech firm files emergency. Chapter 11. After primary creditor calls in mass debt. CEO steps down. His company went under 20 minutes ago, Trevor, Garrison said. The primary creditor pulled the rug out. He's ruined. You're ruined. And thanks to your absolute inability to keep your hands to yourself, you took my firm down with you. Garrison dropped the termination letter on the desk. Get out of my office. Take the stairs. The freight elevators have been turned off. Trevor stood frozen. He looked at the paper. He looked at his swollen wrist. The reality of his absolute, instantaneous destruction finally settled over him like a heavy, suffocating blanket. He hadn't just lost a fight. He had been erased. He turned around, his shoulders slumped, and walked out of the office. He didn't go to his desk to pack his things. He just walked toward the emergency exit stairwell, pushing open the heavy metal door, and began the 42-story descent into the dark. The penthouse sat 60 floors above the city, a sanctuary of glass, polished steel, and quiet. Sadie sat on the edge of the massive king-sized bed, wearing one of Roman's discarded button-down shirts. It swallowed her frame, the hem hitting mid-thigh, the sleeves rolled up past her elbows. The bedroom was dimly lit, bathed in the soft, ambient glow of the city skyline, pouring in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The silence here was different from the silence in the car. It wasn't tense. It was expansive. Roman knelt on the plush rug in front of her. He had taken off his suit jacket and tie, leaving him in his crisp white dress shirt and slacks. The top 2 buttons were undone, revealing the faint edge of a dark tattoo on his collarbone. In his large hands, he held a flexible gel ice pack, wrapped carefully in a thin linen towel. Tell me if it's too cold, he murmured, his eyes focused entirely on her injured calf. It's fine, Sadie said, her voice soft. He pressed the compress gently against the dark purple bruise. Sadie winced slightly, a sharp intake of breath hissing through her teeth. Roman froze immediately, pulling the ice away a fraction of an inch. Sorry, he said, his jaw tightening again. I can have the doctor give you something for the pain. Roman, stop. Sadie reached out, running her fingers through his dark hair. It was thick and soft, a stark contrast to the hard angles of his face. It hurts, but it's just a bruise. It's not the end of the world. He looked up at her, his icy blue eyes catching the city light. He leaned into her touch, a barely perceptible surrender that he only ever offered to her. It is the end of his, Roman said quietly. Sadie didn't ask for details. She knew how Roman's world worked. She didn't want the specifics of Trevor's ruin. She just wanted the door closed on that chapter of her life forever. There was a soft, discreet knock at the bedroom door. Roman didn't move his head, but his eyes shifted toward the sound. Enter. The heavy oak door swung open, and Arthur stepped inside. He kept his eyes politely trained on a spot on the wall slightly above Roman's head, preserving their privacy. Forgive the intrusion, sir, Arthur said, his voice a low rumble. The paperwork for the boutique acquisition has been finalized. The deed has been transferred to Mrs. Sadie's private holding account. And the item? Roman asked. Arthur stepped forward, reaching into his pocket. He produced a small square box wrapped in deep blue velvet. He placed it gently on the edge of the nightstand. Secured, sir. The staff was quite eager to assist. Arthur offered a tight, brief nod. I will leave you for the evening. Security is locked down for the night. Thank you, Arthur, Sadie said softly. Arthur's face softened slightly. Have a good night, Mum. He stepped out, pulling the door quietly shut behind him. Roman looked at the velvet box on the nightstand, then back at Sadie. You bought a store just to get a box. You bought a store to prove a point, Sadie corrected him, a faint smile playing on her lips. She reached over, picking up the velvet box. It felt surprisingly heavy in her hand. She looked at Roman, who was still kneeling in front of her, holding the ice pack against her leg. The juxtaposition of the man who could ruin a life with a phone call, currently serving as her personal nurse, never failed to ground her. I went to the mall today because I wanted to buy you something, Sadie said, her fingers tracing the edge of the velvet lid. You buy me everything. You bought me this apartment. You bought me a new life. You just bought me a jewelry store. Everything I have is yours, Roman stated, as if reciting a fundamental law of physics. I know. She looked down at the box. But I wanted to use the money I made from my own investments, the money you taught me how to manage. I wanted to buy you something with my own name attached to it. She popped the lid open. Nestled against the white silk interior were the rhodium cufflinks. Simple, understated, elegant. They didn't scream wealth. They whispered power. Roman looked at the cufflinks. He didn't say anything for a long moment. He slowly lowered the ice pack, resting it on the edge of the bed, and sat back on his heels. He reached out and took the box from her hands. His large fingers brushed against the metal, tracing the smooth, clean lines. For a man who dealt in millions of dollars in cash, real estate, and leveraged debt daily, he handled the small pieces of rhodium as if they were the crown jewels. They're beautiful, Roman said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. I didn't know if you'd actually wear them, Sadie admitted, feeling a sudden, foolish wave of vulnerability. You're so particular about your clothes. Roman set the box down on the bed. He unbuttoned the simple pearl buttons on his cuffs, pulling them open. He picked up one of the rhodium links, sliding it expertly through the buttonholes of his left sleeve, snapping it shut with a definitive click. He repeated the process with the right. He held his arms out slightly, examining his cuffs. The rhodium caught the city light, gleaming coldly. I will never take them off, Roman said, looking up at her. You can't wear them to bed, Roman, Sadie laughed, a real, genuine sound that finally chased the last remnants of the Galleria out of the room. Roman leaned forward, placing his hands on the mattress on either side of her thighs. He pushed himself up smoothly, towering over her for a brief second before leaning down, pressing his lips to hers. The kiss was slow, deep, and impossibly gentle. It tasted like peppermint and absolute safety. "I make my own rules," he murmured against her mouth. 42 flights of stairs is a long way down in the dark. For the first 10 floors, Trevor walked with a brisk, manic energy. His mind was racing, cataloguing favors he could call in, clients he could poach, rival firms that would love to steal a junior partner from Garrison and Webb. He was Trevor Evans. He wore a $6,000 Rolex. He drove a leased Porsche. He was a master of the pivot. By the 20th floor, the manic energy burned out, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. His right wrist was a throbbing, agonizing weight, the swelling stretching the skin taut against his shirt cuff. Every heavy footfall sent a shockwave of pain up his arm. By the 30th floor, he was limping. The heavy fire doors on each landing were locked from the stairwell side, trapping him in the echo chamber of his own ragged breathing. The smell of industrial dust and ozone coated his throat. He leaned against the concrete wall, clutching his injured arm, staring down into the dizzying spiral of the stairwell. When he finally pushed through the ground floor exit door and stumbled out into the alley behind the building, the sun was beginning to set. The city was transitioning into its evening rhythm. Cabs blared their horns. People in tailored coats hurried past on their way to expensive dinners. Trevor stepped out onto the sidewalk. He had walked this exact stretch of pavement 100 times, always with his head held high, looking past the people around him as if they were scenery. Now he felt entirely exposed. He pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked from where he had dropped it in Garrison's office. 10% battery. He needed to go home. He needed to change out of this suit, ice his wrist, and get to his laptop. He lived in the Onyx Tower, a hyper-modern high-rise overlooking the river. It was a status symbol. It was proof he had made it. He hailed a cab with his left hand, the driver eyeing his pale, sweating face with suspicion. 20 minutes later, the cab pulled up to the glass-fronted lobby of his building. Trevor swiped his credit card on the terminal in the back seat. Declined. Trevor stared at the glowing red text. "Run it again," he snapped at the driver. The driver tapped the screen. Declined. "Buddy, you got cash or what?" the driver asked, turning around, his tone hardening. Trevor fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a $50 bill. He shoved it through the partition and practically fell out of the cab, ignoring the driver's grumbled curse. He walked up to the heavy glass doors of the Onyx Tower. He reached for his pocket to grab his key fob, but before he could, the door opened. A doorman in a crisp grey uniform stepped out, blocking the entrance. "Evening, Hector," Trevor said, trying to push past him. Hector didn't move. He was a man Trevor had tipped exactly 0 times in 2 years. A man Trevor regularly complained to management about for being too slow with the dry cleaning. "I'm sorry, Mr. Evans," Hector said, his voice entirely devoid of apology. "I can't let you in." Trevor stopped. "What are you talking about? I live in Penthouse 4. "You lived in Penthouse 4, Hector corrected him, crossing his arms over his chest. "Your lease is corporate, held by Garrison and Webb. We received a call from their accounting department an hour ago. The lease is terminated. Your key fob has been deactivated." "My things!" Trevor choked out, panic rising in his chest like bile. "My clothes! My computer!" "Building management sent a crew up 20 minutes ago. Everything is being boxed and moved to a secure storage facility downtown to be held against the damages you apparently owe your firm," Hector recited perfectly. He looked Trevor up and down, taking in the pale, sweating face, the ruined posture. "You are officially trespassing, sir. I have to ask you to step off the property before I call the police." Trevor stood on the pavement. The wind sweeping off the river was biting, slicing through the thin wool of his suit. He looked up at the towering glass monolith he used to call home. The lights were already off in his apartment. He was locked out. His phone buzzed in his hand. 8% battery. He scrolled frantically through his contacts, stopping on the name of his closest friend, a guy named Greg, who worked in private equity. They played squash on Thursdays. They drank scotch that cost $400 a bottle. Greg owed him. He hit dial. The phone rang 3 times before connecting. "Greg, man, thank God," Trevor rushed out. "I need a huge favor. My cards are frozen. My firm just pulled some illegal stunt with my housing—" "Trevor," Greg interrupted. His voice wasn't warm. It sounded terrified, like he was speaking to a man holding a live grenade. "Do not call this number again." Trevor froze. "What?" "Greg, it's me." "What's going on?" "My managing director pulled me into a closed-door meeting 15 minutes ago," Greg said, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "He asked me what my association with you was. I told him we played squash. He told me if I ever speak to you again, I'm blacklisted from Wall Street. Trevor, whatever you did, whoever you pissed off, they own everything. They are wiping you off the map. Lose my number." The line went dead. Trevor lowered the phone. 6% battery. He looked around the street. The luxury high-rises, the fine dining restaurants, the sleek black cars gliding by. This was his world. He had clawed his way up to it, stepping on anyone he had to, including Sadie, to secure his place in it. And in a single afternoon, a man he didn't even know had simply turned it off. The wind howled down the avenue. For the first time in 3 years, Trevor Evans felt the cold. Trevor spent the night on a concrete bench inside a subterranean subway station. He didn't sleep. The pain in his wrist kept him tethered to consciousness, a constant, sickening throb that made his teeth ache. The station smelled of stale urine, hot metal, and damp earth. A rat the size of a small shoe scurried past his designer leather shoes at 3 in the morning. He didn't even have the energy to kick at it. When the sun finally rose, filtering dimly through the great grills above, Trevor looked down at himself. His navy suit was wrinkled and stained with soot. His tie hung loosely around his neck. He smelled like sweat and despair. He was exactly what he had accused Sadie of being. A vagrant. He needed to fix this. His lawyer's brain, previously paralyzed by shock, finally started searching for a loophole. There was no fighting Roman. The man was a ghost who controlled the physical world. You couldn't sue a phantom. You couldn't reason with an earthquake. But there was Sadie. Sadie was the lever. She was the weak point. Trevor remembered the girl who used to cry when he raised his voice, the girl who would apologize even when she was right, just to keep the peace. She was soft. She had always been soft. If he could just get to her, bypass the terrifying monolith of a husband, he could make her see reason. He could beg. He would get on his knees and cry if he had to. She would feel pity. She would tell Roman to call off the dogs. Trevor pulled himself off the bench. His legs were stiff, his joints aching from the damp cold. He spent the morning walking. He didn't know where she lived, but he knew where he had been destroyed. He made his way back toward the commercial district, dragging his feet along the pavement. He staked out the entrance of the commercial tower where Garrison and Webb was housed. Roman owned the building. Roman had men there. It was a massive gamble, but it was the only thread he had left to pull. He waited for 4 hours. He bought a black coffee with the last of his pocket change, wrapping his good hand around the paper cup for warmth. At exactly 1:15 in the afternoon, a sleek, armored Maybach pulled up to the curb. Trevor's heart hammered against his ribs. He stepped out from the shadow of the adjacent building, his eyes locked on the heavy rear door. The door opened. A massive man in a dark suit stepped out first. Felix. His eyes immediately scanned the crowd, cataloguing threats with terrifying mechanical precision. Then Sadie stepped out. Trevor's breath hitched. She wasn't wearing the baggy denim and simple sweater from yesterday. She wore a tailored slate-grey wool coat over a dark silk dress. Her hair was swept back, elegant and effortless. She looked perfectly at ease, perfectly secure. She was carrying a small white box from a high-end bakery. She looked like she belonged to a world Trevor had never even been allowed to see. Before his rational mind could stop him, Trevor broke from the crowd. "Sadie!" The sound of his voice cutting through the ambient street noise acted like a trigger. Felix didn't even look surprised. He simply moved, stepping cleanly between Sadie and Trevor, his hand slipping inside his suit jacket. Arthur appeared from the front seat of the car, flanking her other side. Trevor threw his good hand up in surrender, stopping 10 feet away. "Please, Sadie, please, just let me talk to you," he pleaded, his voice cracking. Sadie stopped walking. She looked around Felix's broad shoulder. Her expression didn't change. There was no shock. There was no fear. There was only a quiet, profound observation. She held up a single finger. Felix paused, though his eyes never left Trevor's chest. "Let him speak," Sadie said quietly. Trevor swallowed hard. He took a tentative half-step forward, his posture hunched, broken. "Sadie, look at me. Look what he did to me. I lost my job. I lost my apartment. My fiancée changed her number. I slept in the subway, Sadie. I have absolutely nothing." He waited for the empathy. He waited for the soft gasp, the softening of her eyes. Nothing happened. "I'm sorry," Trevor begged, tears springing to his eyes, a mixture of genuine physical pain and sheer exhaustion. "I was an idiot. I was arrogant. I know I hurt you. I know I was cruel. But this is too much. You know me, Sadie. We lived together. We shared a life. Please, you're not a cruel person. Tell him to stop. Just give me my life back." Sadie looked at him. She looked at the ruined suit, the desperate eyes, the swollen wrist tucked against his chest. "We didn't share a life, Trevor," Sadie said, her voice carrying clearly over the sound of traffic. "It was perfectly level. I served you. I funded you. And when you were done using me, you took my last $600 so you could take Chloe to a steakhouse to celebrate your promotion." Trevor flinched. The fact that she knew that detail felt like a physical blow. "I slept in my car for 2 weeks in November because I couldn't make rent," Sadie continued. Her tone wasn't angry. It was informational. "I showered at a public gym. I ate expired bread from the diner. Where was your empathy then?" "I didn't know," he cried. "You didn't care," she corrected him. "You only care now because the consequences of your arrogance finally caught up to you. You didn't come here to apologize to me, Trevor. You came here to save yourself." She adjusted the bakery box in her hands. "I'm not doing this to you. Roman is not doing this to you. You did this to yourself the moment you decided my physical space belonged to you. You kicked the wrong person." She turned away, signaling to Arthur. "Sadie, please. You can't just leave me like this. I'm starving." Trevor lunged forward, a pathetic, desperate attempt to grab her sleeve. He didn't make it 2 feet. Felix's hand shot out, grabbing Trevor by the collar of his ruined suit, lifting him forcefully onto his toes. The bodyguard didn't say a word. He just held him there, suspended, gasping for air. Sadie didn't look back. She walked into the glass lobby of the tower, the heavy doors sealing shut behind her. Trevor hung in Felix's grip, his vision swimming, the reality of his absolute, irreversible defeat finally crushing the last of his spirit. The velvet trap had closed. There was no way out. Felix did not drop him. He dragged Trevor effortlessly backward, away from the glass doors, toward the curb where the Maybach idled. A second vehicle, a jet-black Lincoln Navigator, had pulled up silently directly behind the Maybach. Felix shoved Trevor against the rear door of the Navigator. Trevor slumped against the cold metal, his chest heaving, his injured arm throbbing so violently he thought he might pass out. The tinted window of the Navigator rolled down with a soft, electronic hum. Roman sat in the back seat. He was wearing a dark cashmere overcoat, reading a tablet. He didn't look up immediately. He let Trevor stand there, let the silence stretch and pull until Trevor's nerves were screaming. Finally, Roman tapped the screen of the tablet, turning it off. He slowly turned his head to look at the man outside the window. His eyes were exactly as they had been in the boutique. Glacial. Empty. Terrifying. You were explicitly instructed to never let me see your face in my city again, Roman said softly. I needed to. Trevor couldn't form a sentence. The sheer, suffocating presence of the man erased whatever lawyerly vocabulary he had left. You believed she was a weakness you could exploit? Roman noted, reading Trevor's intentions with effortless clarity. You thought her kindness was a flaw in my armor. It is not. Her kindness is the only reason you are currently breathing. Roman reached beside him on the leather seat and picked up a thick, manila envelope. He held it out the window. Trevor stared at it, his hands shaking. He reached out with his left hand and took it. It felt heavy. "Open it," Roman commanded. Trevor fumbled with the metal clasp, pulling the flap open. Inside was a one-way Greyhound bus ticket to Omaha, Nebraska, departing from Port Authority in 90 minutes. Beneath the ticket was a small stack of $20 bills. $500, Roman said. Exactly $100 less than what you stole from her 3 years ago. The cost of inflation. Trevor looked from the money to Roman, his mouth slightly open. There is also a driver's license in that envelope, Roman continued, his voice devoid of any inflection. It has a new name, a new date of birth. From the moment you step onto that bus, Trevor Evans ceases to exist. He has no degree. He has no firm. He has no past. Roman leaned slightly closer to the window. The ambient noise of the street seemed to vanish, leaving only the dark, vibrating timbre of his voice. "These are my terms," Roman said. "You do not contact Chloe. You do not contact your former firm. You do not cross the Mississippi River heading east ever again. You will live a very small, very quiet life in a place where no one cares what watch you wear." Trevor's eyes filled with tears of absolute, profound defeat. "And if I don't?" Roman didn't smile, but a shadow of something utterly merciless crossed his face. "If you do not board that bus in 90 minutes, or if you ever attempt to contact my wife again, I will not take your money. I will not take your job. I will simply erase the biological fact of your existence, and I will sleep flawlessly that night." Roman rolled the window up. The tinted glass slid into place, cutting off Trevor from the world inside the car. Felix stepped back, opening the passenger door of the Navigator and sliding inside. The two vehicles pulled smoothly away from the curb, merging flawlessly into the afternoon traffic, leaving no trace they had ever been there. Trevor stood on the sidewalk alone. He looked down at the manila envelope in his hand. He looked up at the towering glass skyscrapers he used to think he owned. They looked different now. They didn't look like monuments to success. They looked like tombstones. He didn't scream. He didn't cry out. He just turned, tucking his injured wrist against his ribs, and began the long, slow walk toward the bus terminal, a ghost walking among the living. High above the city, in the quiet sanctuary of the penthouse, Sadie stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was holding a mug of tea, watching the tiny, insignificant dots of cars moving along the avenues below. The city was massive, indifferent, and beautiful. The heavy door to the apartment opened, and soft, deliberate footsteps crossed the hardwood floor. Roman didn't say anything as he approached her from behind. He simply wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He rested his chin on the top of her head. "It's done," Roman said quietly. Sadie didn't ask what that meant. She didn't need to know the details. She knew Trevor was gone, and she knew he would never be a problem again. The chapter wasn't just closed. The book had been burned. She leaned her head back against his shoulder, letting out a long, slow exhale. The tension that had lived at the base of her neck for 3 years finally dissolved. She reached up, her fingers brushing against the cuff of his shirt. Her thumb traced the cool, smooth metal of the rhodium cufflink. "Thank you," she whispered into the quiet room. Roman turned his head, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. He held her there, high above the noise, high above the past, anchoring her entirely in the present. Always. Did you feel the satisfaction of Trevor finally hitting rock bottom? There's nothing quite like watching arrogant bullies realize they've messed with the untouchable. Sadie didn't just survive her past, she leveled up, and Roman proved exactly why silent power is the most terrifying kind. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button right now. Share this video with a friend who loves a satisfying karma story, and make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next intense drama. Drop a comment below. Did Roman go too far, or did Trevor get exactly what he deserved?